You know, I've spent a long time studying the subject of why we do what we do and why we don't do some of the things that we'd really like to do. And I've come to the conclusion that the two main elements in a successful, fulfilled life is motivation and education. And if we get a proper balance of motivation and education, we're going to find that we're going to be led into some very wise decisions that'll inspire us into some intelligent action, and we will live a very, very fulfilled life. I think many of us have had a false concept programmed into our mind with respect to education. We, I think, have been raised to believe that education is going to school for a certain number of years and be able to correctly answer a series of questions. But you know, many people will go to school all their life and be able to correctly answer the questions, but then when it comes to getting out into the marketplace and really making it happen, they just don't know how to compete. I found if you write a lie on a card and you read it often enough, you're going to start to believe it. And you know, William James, back around the turn of the century, he said, believe, and your belief will actually create the fact. Well, I did what he suggested. I read this card every day. I'd carry it around and I'd just keep reading it. And one day one of the guys in the fire hall got a hold of it and they pulled the card away and they passed it all around. Everybody started to laugh. Proctor's going to get rich. I had a chap in a seminar the other day that he said the same thing had happened to him. He was in a seminar and he got one of these gold cards and they passed it around at work and he said, everybody laughed at me, but he said, I'm winning. Now, I didn't read the card in front of anyone any longer, but I kept reading it. I'd go to the bathroom, and I'd sit in the toilet, and lock the door, and I'd read the card. Or I'd be driving down the street, and I'd come to a traffic light, and I'd haul the card out, and I'd read it. Now, something very funny happened to me. 1 year later, I was earning $175,000 a year. Now, that's an enormous change, and it went well beyond $1 million in a year. Now, that was not supposed to happen. See, everything I'd been taught since I was a little boy indicated that if you don't go to school, you can't win. If you don't have business experience, you can't win. I had not gone to school. My second month in high school, they asked me to leave. I'll never forget how happy I was when they made that decision. As I look back, they were probably much happier than I was when they made that decision. But here I was, I was 16, I had very little knowledge, I had absolutely no skills, and at the very best, my attitude was poor. What chance did I have? I really didn't have any, but I didn't know that. And so I just bummed around from job to job, in and out of the Navy, in and out of factories, in and out of bars, mostly in and out of the bars, until I was 26. Here I was at 26 when Ray sat down with me. I had very little knowledge, absolutely no skills, and my attitude had not improved greatly. But he introduced me to this idea. And I found that it doesn't matter what's happened in the past. You may not have a colorful background, and maybe you have. You may not have a lot of formal education, and maybe you have. But it really doesn't matter if you've got a goal and you're willing to stick to it and study the laws, you're going to find out that you can win. Now, that was like an emotional impact. And I had to find out what happened to me. And so I made up my mind that someone had either written in a book or they were talking about it. And I made up my mind I'd read every book that was ever written if I had to. And I'm going to tell you, I have one of the finest libraries on personal development, psychology, the area of the mind that you're going to find anywhere. And I don't just mean library of books, I mean library of tapes and records. And I would travel anywhere in the world that I heard of a good seminar to find out more about myself. Find out more about you. Find out what makes us tick. And you know a strange thing? I found as I studied me, I understood you better. Because we are essentially all the same. And that's just sort of the way it works. Knowing and doing are poles apart. And I point out in 2 or 3 places in the book that reading and memorizing are not going to make you successful. It's the understanding and then the application of wise thoughts that count. You must understand the idea, and you must go out and act on the idea, regardless of how much your old program wants to hold you back. You've got to bust out of that shell and do the thing that you've got to do. Now, John Ruskin here gives us an excellent concept on education. He said, education does not mean teaching people what they do not know. It means teaching them, showing them, leading them to behave as they do not behave. Now, I choose to believe that every one of you wants something. Way down deep inside of you is a dream. And every now and then that dream floats to the surface of your conscious mind. And when it does, you quickly push it out and you say, I can't do that. Now, the truth is you can, you just don't know how. And if you can get that straight in your mind, I'm going to tell you, you busted out. Now, Vernon Howard one time pointed out in a magnificent book, Mystic Path to Cosmic Power, you cannot escape from a prison if you don't know you're in one. You cannot escape from a prison if you don't know you're in one. Well, I think we're all in one to some degree. But that dream you've got that comes to your mind, I would suggest you look at it real carefully. We've got to do what's inside of us. Let's not go to the grave with the music still in us. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, do the thing and you'll get the energy to do the thing. Do the thing and you'll get the energy to do the thing. Don't wait. Start right now whether you're ready or not. Just say, I'm going after it, I'm going to get it, and your present circumstances got nothing to do with where you're going. Your circumstances may be uncongenial right now, but they will not long remain so if you perceive an ideal and strive to reach it. Now think of that. You may not have much money. Your social life may be in a bit of a chaotic state. Maybe your business isn't going the way you'd really want it to go. He said your circumstances may be uncongenial, but they will not long remain so if you perceive an ideal and strive to reach it. I want to suggest now that you really put on your thinking hat. I have a paper here that was written by a gentleman who has since passed away. He was a great Canadian, and he introduced himself as Dr. Rampell. And he said, no, he had a doctorate's degree in thinking. Now, do you know, he had the only doctorate's degree in thinking that had ever, up till that time, come out of the University of Toronto. It took him 11 years to get it. Every time he went to go down a road, somebody put a block up in front of him and say, no one has a doctorate's degree in thinking. Now, that's rather odd, especially when you consider that thinking is the highest function of which a human being is capable, and all the great leaders, all down through history, have been in complete and unanimous agreement that you and I become what we think about. Now, play with that for a moment. It's a subject that is not taught in school. It's the highest function of which we're capable, and every great leader that has ever lived all told us that you and I become what we think about most of the time. Dr. Rampell wrote a paper, Tools for Teaching Thinking. He said thinking is a skill which can be learned just as we learn skills such as typing and playing the piano. Now, he said few public schools offer courses devoted expressly to teaching thinking. Rather, we are expected to learn and teach thinking as a byproduct of learning mathematics, reading, science, history, trade, and so forth. And he said we do, in fact, learn a lot about thinking in this way. The trouble is, we learn our thinking skills in bits and pieces, and we never put it together as an overall picture. If asked to describe what all is required in order to think effectively, most people would be at a loss to give a complete account. Thus, we are unable to assess our own thinking skills or systematically teach the skill of thinking to others. Now, consider this for a moment. When you think in pictures. Check it out. I'm going to suggest that you think of the home you live in, and as you do, realize that an image of your home comes onto the screen of your mind. It's almost as if there's a screen running right through the center of our head, and the second we think of our home, the picture of the home comes onto the screen of our mind. Now I want to suggest that you think of your automobile. And the second you think of your automobile, the picture of the home is gone and the picture of the automobile is there. Think of your kitchen, your backyard. Think of where you work or go to school. And bang, 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 just like that, the picture changes. We literally think in pictures. Now I'm going to suggest that you think of your mind. Now when most people think of their mind, they get an image of the brain. How many thought of the brain? Quite a few hands going up. And yet you know the brain is not the mind any more than the fingernail is. And paradoxically, the fingernail and the brain is the mind. You see, mind is an activity and body is the manifestation of that activity. The body is really nothing but an instrument of the mind. Now, Your